Ideally, I would be someone who gets murdered like real fast and they
Stop.
just kick me out of the Zoom call and then I can go on to do something else. Is that how that works with a murder mystery Zoom call? They just boot you out of the off the call? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, you're dead unless you're a ghost giving clues later.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Heading to WP podcast. I'm Marcus Burnett, and with me is my co-host TJ Rogers. How are you doing today, TJ?
Hey, I'm doing good. What's up, everyone? Hope you had a lovely holiday weekend. And now we are back to the grind with everyone else. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm good. That's right. If you all missed it last week, we put out a very short special episode of some of the things that we were thankful for in honor of Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So make sure that you go back and take a look at that, or take a listen. I would say. Yeah. So we're recording this in the morning instead of the evening as usual. I'm not a morning person, so we'll see how this goes today. All right, in this episode we want to dive into a subject that's more on the business side of building websites rather than specifically about building sites themselves. We're going to talk about what we want clients to know about working with a freelancer or web agency. We've both done freelance work and worked at an agency together for almost 10 years. So let's talk about some of the things we either shared with our clients or wish they had known already. Since you're working at an agency now, TJ, why don't you start us off with the first one?
Sure thing. So there is one that, my goodness, came up earlier this week, and it has to do with website changes,
Mm-hmm.
especially getting close to the launch of the site. There are many times where it feels like, you get to 95% of the site being built and working, and sometimes getting it across the finish line can be a killer. It can get pushed back weeks, months. There's even a project that we launched a website maybe a month or so ago, and this client had the website in the works for almost a year. And things come up, but one thing that there's a couple of things that come out of the particular instance or situation that happened this week that would be great for clients to know is that, one, they have expectations of ourselves as the building, developing, designing, and launching the site. We have responsibility for specific deadlines and getting stuff done in a particular pace. Sometimes I wish that the clients understood that they have a responsibility on their end too for keeping up some of their urgency in getting us materials and content and whatnot, whether it be getting images or copy, team member profiles to us in a timely manner that will help, fill out the site and keep the project moving along. Sometimes, again, it's not their day job. They have, for us specifically, since we're working with dental practices and doctors, they're seeing their clients and their patients all day. They don't always have enough time to kind of compile all those things and get that stuff to us and get it together. But it comes down to the end of the building cycle and trying to get ready to launch, and they're wondering, if we're maybe moving at a snail's pace all of a sudden, or what things that we can do or they can do to get the project over a particular hump or speed bump or obstacle. And sometimes it can be that we're still waiting on content from them so that we can get it in there to get the site live, or else there's several pages with either dummy or lorem ipsum type information and content and dummy text, that wouldn't make sense for a user or an audience to see. Sometimes that just comes down to communication. This will be one that, either of us will probably touch on a little later, because as we know, in all of life, communication is extremely important, even as little as getting expectations out there at the very least. So that's one thing that I wish clients knew, is that, they have a responsibility on their end to help the project move along as well. And sometimes that may require coaching or communication from us, when those times come up, in a timely manner, so that we're not waiting for everything at the end, where we can say, oh, hey, worked on this page, but we don't have this content, we'll move on to another section. Just keep in mind that we'll need these tidbits of content and
Hmm.
pictures, information, media from you, so that we don't get stalled out at the end or whatever. So that's definitely one, is that clients knowing that they will have some responsibility for some portions of the project, so that it keeps moving at a pretty good pace, and that we can meet deadlines and timeframes.
Yeah, that's definitely a classic one, right? Struggling to get content sometimes, unless it's specifically written into the proposal and the project brief and all of that, that content is going to come from the agency. A lot of times the client thinks that, I've hired this agency, and that's kind of, this is the double-edged sword, right? A lot of times you want to have that autonomy to be able to run with the project the way you want to as an
Yes.
agency, but also once you've started that project, it's a two-way street, right? It's going to require a bit of effort, a bit of work on the client's part as well. Nobody knows their business as well as they do, so there's that back and forth, that communication you were talking about, where you definitely need to um need to get content from them, especially ideally not at the very end. Ideally that content is being added in throughout the project, and you're not waiting till the very end to get that last bit of content. But that certainly happens to many projects. Get to the end and you're trying to wrap things up, and it's just some missing pieces from the clients that need to go in there. I think I had one that was similar. It was, yeah, it wasn't specifically around content, but similar in that it's kind of at the end of the project. I had that feedback, when done respectfully, is extremely helpful, so don't wait until the end of the project to voice concerns. um we've seen that a number of times, right? You get through to the end, you've done about 90% of the project or so, and all of a sudden, I'm not really, I don't really like the way the homepage is laid out. And you're like, well, we kind of talked about the homepage 3 months ago, and that would have been a good time for us to, make some changes. Again, like, that feedback is great. We don't want that feedback withheld. We just want that feedback as early as possible, so
Yeah,
that we can
absolutely.
make those changes and move forward. Chances are, in a situation like that, a lot of the rest of the site is based on that
Yes.
early design, that early
Yes.
work. And so coming back at the end and having to change it is not just changing a homepage, it's changing content, it's changing layout and design, sidebars and all of that sort of stuff throughout a website. So that feedback is really important to get early on, even, at each step, right? If it's the homepage, then let's talk about it and get that feedback at the homepage. But even throughout the rest of the project, if site, parts of the site functionality aren't working in the way that you might expect it to, let the agency know that, like, right when you are thinking of that, so they can tweak that. Because that whatever search feature or something might be powering other parts of the site, so having to go
Oh
back
yeah.
and modify that search feature might have repercussions about other pieces of the site that need to be reworked to still continue to work the way they need to. So um, feedback is critical. That's kind of the point I wanted to make there. Give feedback throughout the project. Don't keep a running tally of things that you'd like to see changed and submit them at the very end. That is the wrong time to submit at least feedback from earlier on in the project, right? There's always that review time at the very end to kind of go back over everything, and that's certainly, there's time for feedback in there too. However, that step is real short if you've given good feedback throughout the process, because a lot of
Hmm.
those things will have already been tackled, already been managed, and that final review should be really easy.
Yes. Piggybacking off of that, I 100% agree. And this we ran into a lot at the last agency I was at. And I mean, again, this is sort of stuff that can be expected in agency,
Yeah, a
work
lot of
life.
these are pretty universal.
Yes, absolutely, very universal. This one we will run into a lot where, um, like you were talking about, and like we mentioned earlier, is baking some of these expectations into the pitches and into documentation for the product so that everyone's on the same page. That, sometimes we'll get to what you're talking about at the very end, and we've had semi-good feedback, but then they kind of want to change something again, like you're saying, not realizing that these systems affect each other, and there aren't many things in a website that are just isolated. And so understanding that, about a week before launch, a client shouldn't expect to be able to do, like you're saying, 4 or 5 revisions. At Next Horizon, we did have it baked into that they were able to get at least 2 revisions, and anything after that would either come with a change order, or that, it would need to cost more. And understandably, again, their industry or their field that they're in, the client may not see it this way. But if I was to go to a particular dentist and say, hey, I don't really like this tooth over here, can you give me, a replacement tooth, or put in some dentures or an implant over here? Oh, you know what, I don't like that, can we do it again? I know this is 3 hours of your time and cost of your materials, but I don't want to pay for this, and a client may not understand that is essentially what them asking for, 6 or 7 extra revisions is costing time and money, the same way that they would understand that within the own realm of their industry or practice or focus. Is, if again, communication, if we can just help them to understand that, they wouldn't want somebody asking for 7 different operations in one procedure, that doesn't just mean it will automatically, be 1/5 of the cost or the same price of one procedure, or 3 of those operations within, a procedure or 2. Is that understanding that, it is a creative thing, but we are also a business. And if they understand the money end from their perspective, that some of these things again wouldn't happen if there was a little bit of clarity, transparency, and again, communication. So I 100% agree that we can run into pitfalls of that within an agency. So I'm glad you bring that up, because that was along the lines of one of the other thoughts that I had concerning clients' awareness and whatnot. But yeah, that was really, really good point.
Yeah, I love that you at that agency that you all baked that into the contract with, setting clear expectations, like you said before. But also, like, clients don't know, which is fine, because it's not their business to know how the web industry works, right? So if you're a client, you don't know if one revision is out of the question. I mean, I think about your example for like dentistry, right? Like, if I go in and I'm asking them to redo something they've done in my mouth, it's like, well, we did it the way that it was supposed to be done because I'm a dentist and I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
But so like one revision might seem like too much already, or is like 10 revisions too many, right? They don't know. So the fact that you baked that into the contract and said, we'll give you 2 revisions at no additional cost, kind of sets that foundation for how many revisions is reasonable to ask.
Yeah.
Before it starts to take more time and money than is being covered in what they're already paying. So not knowing really on a scale at all how many revisions seems like a reasonable amount. It's great that that's baked in so that you kind of set that baseline. I really like that. So the next one is, it's along those same lines that I have. And I'm sure if you are in an agency or a freelancer, you've definitely heard this phrase before. And it's going to be about scope creep, right? So
yes.
Scope creep, if you're unaware of what scope creep is, like we've sort of been talking about a little bit, changes that are outside what was initially agreed in any kind of contract or whatever. There are always going to be times where people ask for more. That's great. That counts as, any of that's outside of what the original proposal or contract was is called scope creep. So what I had written down is scope creep benefits no one. If the agency or freelancer can't survive because of the additional work that they're having to do, then they're not going to be around to support your project. Maybe not even around to complete your project, but even if we do manage to complete your project, may not be around to support your project afterwards.
Right.
So it certainly doesn't benefit the agency. Agencies are businesses, so doing work that's outside of the original proposed contract is just lost money, lost time. But it doesn't benefit the client either, right? If the agency isn't around to continue on the project, then the the client has to find a new developer, start a new relationship, and starting that whole process over is expensive. It also takes a lot of time. So when agencies and freelancers are asking for additional money for some of those changes like you talked about before, right, beyond those revisions, or let's say a new feature gets asked for mid project that wasn't agreed
Yep.
on to begin with, right, the fact that the agency or freelancer is asking for more money there isn't a cash grab. It isn't because they want some kind of leverage. It's because they want to stay in business. And being able to take on those additional projects, if they're able to do that, will require additional funds.
Certainly.
And like I said, those things are important for the client as well, because as if the freelancer agency stays in business, then certainly they can continue to do more work with the client. So that was kind of what I wanted to mention there about scope creep. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Um, not anything particularly going with scope creep. Not anything else I can think about. But switching gears a little bit,
Okay.
talking about expertise and stuff. Sometimes being in a creative field can be a little bit of a dance because everybody's got a little bit of creativity in them. So sometimes we
Mhm.
have preferences or dislikes of particular colors, layouts, features, structurally, how content is and everything.
Yeah, I know where you're
Um,
I know where you're headed with this. I have this one on my list too, for
okay.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah, keep
perfect.
keep going.
Yeah. So sometimes it feels like if you're in a creative type of environment or business, it doesn't feel like we have the same respect from our clients in terms of our expertise, because again, everyone has preferences and ideas of particular things, and so again, communication, getting these things out in the open and talking about what a client likes or what they might want to see, or even inspirations to them of particular websites, especially within the same sort of field, can be helpful, but they can also be detrimental to the project as a whole,
Hmm.
because they may love the color purple, but the color purple doesn't signify to an audience or a user, the same thing that it may signify to somebody just because they like that color. If they hate the color red, well, the color red can mean stop, the color red can mean passion, and using that in the design and in the UI in a way that helps the user go through the site and get to do what they want to do on the website and the task and the goal that they want to accomplish, then that is probably a great fight is not the right word, but sometimes standing up for what we believe in as a
Hmm.
designer, particularly as an expert, can be tricky because you don't want to make a client feel unheard or as if you're being dismissive or they're feeling stupid or inadequate, because that's not helpful either. But trying to communicate these things um, in a way that a client can understand, because again, and then again, it is a little bit of a dance. Some things you can cave on, and some things you really need to put your foot down on, and some things you can compromise on for the sake of the project getting done. But again, some things you kind of have to say, hey, we're the expert and we're going to need you to trust us on this, the same way I wouldn't tell my mechanic how to fix my engine, because Lord knows if they did it my way, if he or she did it my way, my car will be in worse shape than it is. And sometimes clients have to find that out the hard way, not on the web development end itself. One of our account managers had a client stop services with us for about a month and a half, and they
Hmm.
were trying to handle the marketing and the SEO. And we have different departments for that, so I don't have my hands in that the way that we did at some of the other agencies that we've been at.
Right.
Um, but the client found out the hard way that it wasn't as easy as it looked, and keeping up with and changing and finding keywords that are good for your particular area or the particular whether area locally or area as far as expertise and say dental implants or veneers, teeth whitening, stuff like that, is that we have people that research that
Hmm.
and do hours of searching and tweaking to get that stuff right. And they see that it's right. It's stuff that still needs to be evolutionary, and then sometimes needs to change. And so they might not have as great a handle on that as an expert, say someone who is our SEO expert or a PPC expert or a campaign expert. And all of a sudden that stuff can tank really fast, and then they've already wasted $3,000 of their own money, but then they got to come back
Yeah.
and pay us and then get back on board to get it back to where it was and then grow again. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Sometimes the trust and learning the process and seeing it work can take more patience than a client may be aware of. And sometimes that can turn into a tornado really quickly. And so trust and expertise is, something, especially in a creative field, that can be a hard thing to get a handle on, and so that's one big thing I think I would like clients to know, is that, to be able to trust the expertise that you're actually paying for. If you know it all,
Yeah.
then why even bother paying someone else to try to do it for you?
Right. Yeah. No, and like I said, I have that exact same point on my list as well, is that, like, as an agency, we're hired for a reason. I think there's a disconnect sometimes. I think, right, it's not necessarily the client's fault, but I think there's a disconnect sometimes where the client may not realize that if we make them successful, that's what makes us as an agency successful as well. Assuming that you've done a little bit of research and hired the right agency or freelancer.
Yes.
That freelancer or agency has your company, your business's best interest at heart. They're going to build for your customers, not for you, not for the agency, right? We all have
That's right. That's right.
We all have our own preferences. But at the end of the day, what's going to make your business most successful is having something that's built for your customers. And so that's what, assuming again that you've gotten the right agency, that's what the agency or freelancer is going to do. They're going to take your customers' preferences as top priority, because that's what's going to be effective. That's what's going to work. I, as a freelancer and as someone who's been on the business side of agency things as well, would much rather that you're successful and continue to pay me a little bit less for the next 10 years than a little bit more, like, for the next couple of months, right? We're not here to try and get as much money as quickly as possible from you and then bail. Again, there are exceptions, and hopefully none of you out there have had to deal with that. But as a successful agency or freelancer, the goal is to have that continuous work. And as time goes on, if I'm helping you be successful, you continue to pay me, which is exactly what I want. If I'm making you very successful, then at some point the rates go up and I can get paid more. So as a freelancer or agency, my number one top priority is to do the things that are going to make your business as successful as possible, because that's what will make my business as successful as possible. So when we have those pushbacks, those disagreements about, well, this is how we think it should be, this is how you think it should be, generally, or at least this was the case for me, I had reasons behind why I did things the way I did, and they were always customer priority number one reasons.
Yes.
I didn't make that button blue because I like blue. I made that button blue because your customers have shown time and time again, and the web in general has shown, I have all this data to support why I made this decision for your, not that all buttons need to be blue, but I have data to support the decisions that I made in designing your site, or why I put a certain page, in a certain place in your site, or why I made this feature work the way it did. It's not because I like it that way, or I think you're going to like it that way. It's because I think the customer is going to like it that way, and that's going to make you successful, which is in turn going to make us successful. So this whole win-win-win game that we're trying to do here. But like you said very early on in that, is that when you hire an agency, you did that because you've done a little bit of research into the agency, and the agency is going to do, or the freelancer is going to do the best work possible based on their expertise in that field to make you successful. So the other sort of sub bullet that I have there is just remember why you hired the agency or the freelancer in the first place. They're subject matter experts, and you have to lean into that. Otherwise, to be honest, you're wasting some of your money too. If you're just gonna pay
Right.
a freelancer or an agency to do it the way you wanted to do it, you don't need an agency. You just need someone who knows
Yes.
how to build a website. The agency or freelancer is going to come in and provide that subject matter expertise, and that's where the value lies in what you're paying for. So lean into that. Make sure that you're using that to your advantage.
Oh yeah. I do have a real world example, and I think that you'll remember this plain as day. Um, at least at Thrive, and I ran into it a lot at Next Horizon. But I remember finding that sliders, in the hero section of the site, we
Mm-hmm.
found that data showed people definitely weren't waiting to slide number 3. A lot of times people were even getting to slide number 2 to even bother clicking on it. The user usually takes their action, within the first, especially if it's right up in the hero and header section, that the action is taken very quickly. So having 8 sliders of information
Yeah, either
is
taken
not
very
good for anyone.
quickly or very quickly passed over is what
Yes,
we right is
absolutely.
what we found. So don't bury what you consider important things, right? A lot of times, I think we joked about this, right? That hero slider carousel is the fix for design by committee. Everyone thinks their thing is
Yes,
the most
sir.
important thing, so it's got to go at the top of the homepage. So fine, we'll have it scroll through a bunch of things, that way everyone can be happy. But the reality is that those things don't get looked at. The very
Right.
first one gets looked at and possibly clicked. The second one might get seen. Beyond that, I mean, it's just a black hole up there. It either has been scrolled past or they've already clicked and moved on to the next thing. So yeah, what were you gonna say? But yeah, those were some, whatever you want to call it, hills that we had to die on a couple of times.
Yes.
Listen, we're not doing this because we want to please you. We do, but we're doing this because we want to please your customers, and in doing so, that will make you successful as well.
Right. Yes, because not only did it come down to the hero itself, right? Because everyone wanted some of their everything, not even the most important, the most critical information for a user to navigate the site or help them do. Again, like you've mentioned a couple of times, we are very conscious, development side, whether it's us ourselves or the content writers or the people designing the UX and how the content is structured and how user flow is established throughout the site, is we're thinking very deeply about that. It's not run and gun. It's not off the
Mm-hmm.
cuff or by the whim. And we, outside of a lot of information being top heavy above the fold, is that a lot of people wanted like everything on the homepage as well, so it could look very yard saley. We found a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sites that we were redoing or redesigning that everything was bold text, bright red, or the homepage just was saturated with so much information and so many directions to go that that can be overwhelming to somebody who has a particular purpose of wanting to simply schedule an appointment to look at a car, or
Yeah.
find out about your pricing. They don't need all of that stuff. And so, being able to trust an expert to organize the information and organize the flow of your website and not have to have everything on the homepage, but help guide your user to what their purpose is. The website isn't for you. The website is for your user,
Right.
and so sometimes we get lost in that we're
Yeah.
we're we're not Luke Skywalker, we're Yoda, and we're trying to guide them to what they want and what they need.
Yeah, I remember those where it was like, well, we need everything on the entire site to be on the homepage also, and it needs to be up as high on the page as possible to be above the folds, and it needs to be bold, and it needs to be our brand color because it's going to stick out. And we're like, it's that, what is it from Incredibles, right?
That's exactly what my thought
When
was.
everything's important, nothing's important. So
Yes, sir.
what you've done there is you've de-emphasized in doing all of that and creating this crazy yard sale of a top of the homepage. You've de-emphasized everything on your site from being important because no one knows where to start. No one
Yep.
knows what to look at, where they need to go. And there's definitely some intentionality that needs to happen there to have a much cleaner experience that leads your customers through to the things that you want them to do. If that's a WooCommerce store, you want to create the environment where you're leading customers through the store into the checkout and making a purchase. If it's,
Yes.
like you said, booking an appointment, right? You're leading people through the information that they need to know that you're the right place to book an appointment with, and over to the appointment booking system. Having all of that just crunched in the top makes it just impossible to know what it is, where to start.
Oh yeah, that'll increase your bounce rate, and that'll be a pretty surefire way to get them to go to someone else's website
Yeah,
where they can be directed to, yeah, booking a salon appointment or booking a flight or whatever it is that they're looking to do. Absolutely.
yeah. And just a side note, the solution is not to have all that and then have a pop-up on top of that to show what the next thing is you want them to do. That'll get me out of there so fast.
Oh yeah, there might even be some curse words on the way out. Yes. Yeah, that's very true.
Don't do that.
Is there anything else that you working with an agency wish that clients understood or knew about agency life?
Yeah, I have one more, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but I think it's important to note kind of as its own thing, is that when you're working together with a freelancer, an agency, and the client, both sides need to know what being successful in the project looks like. And
Ooh,
the
yes.
earlier that you can define that, the better. Again, with the example of an e-commerce store, is it like dollars in sales that's going to determine whether or not the site is successful? Whether it's that or not, if it's not an e-commerce store, or even if it is it like traffic numbers that's going to define whether it's successful? Is it Google search positioning ranking that's going to decide whether the project is successful or not? The earlier in the process that can be defined, the easier it will be for everyone to be on the same page. We get back to like what we've just been talking about, all the stuff on the homepage and everything. This expectation is what's going to decide whether or not those things are a good idea. It's going to help drive all of the factors. Any of the things that we've talked about are places where we have to pick and choose our battles. Well, those battles are all going to be decided ideally by whether or not they feed the goal, feed what it is that we're trying to accomplish together, whether that's sales dollars or traffic or whatever. Is the decision that we're making going to be beneficial to that goal or not? And I think that one gives everybody a way to determine whether or not the final outcome of the project is exactly what everyone wanted it to be. But it's also going to help along the process, along the way of that project, to help make those determinations when doing the design, right? Is the design focused on sales? Is it focused on traffic? Is it focused on SEO? Same with the content. Is the content funneling people where it needs to? Is it getting people to the site with high search engine rankings and all of that stuff? Every piece of the design, development, content, launch, post launch, all of that stuff is going to have to feed whatever the main goal is, or a main couple of goals. It doesn't have to be just one, it can be two or three. But when you get to those roadblocks where you and the client are kind of butting heads a little bit about what you think is the right
Mm-hmm.
approach, you can both look at that and say,
Mm,
is it going to serve this goal or not? And you might be wrong, the client might be right, and that's fine. But as long as you have
yes.
kind of this framework to work from, to say, okay, I see where you're coming from. What you're saying probably will drive. I was thinking traffic numbers, you were thinking sales. Sales is a higher priority. So let's do it the way that you're proposing, because I agree that's going to probably help with sales numbers and stuff. So just having that framework in place early on to drive all of the decisions throughout, and at the very end, hopefully you're hitting those goals, and that makes everybody happy, because then you have this tangible thing to say, this is what we said we wanted to do. We're here.
Mm-hmm.
Sales are going through the roof. We did a great job. Let's talk about how we continue this relationship going forward. What are things that we can do monthly, yearly, or whatever to help you out? Obviously, we did a great job for you because we have numbers to prove that we did a great job for you. We hit
Yep.
what
Yep.
you said was the priority for your business. So let's continue this relationship going forward. So that was definitely one that I wanted to make sure that we had in there. Clear expectations in general, but really setting those goals and then using those as markers when you're trying to make decisions throughout the project.
I cannot tell you how much I love that. Like I have to listen to this a couple times over, because that's not only important for this, but we'll probably come back to this in other episodes where we're talking about personal or professional growth, or
Hmm.
talking about the process itself. We kind of lose the fact that metrics and goals are not for the sake of themselves, but like you're saying, building that structure and that framework, the metrics and the framework will help us get to those goals. And then we can always assess and then reassess and then adjust and then run the cycle again. Example, I mean, getting fit. Again, we can talk about this later, but it's fine to say with the new year rolling around, I want to get fit. That's great.
Hmm.
What does that mean? I want to lose such and such pounds, or I want to bulk up. Like you were saying, if I want to bulk up as opposed to slim down, I'll be eating totally differently. The calories, the carbs are
Right.
different for someone who wants to build muscle as opposed to someone who wants to lose fat.
Hmm.
And we need to remember that. And a lot of times I think we
But then you use
forget.
that every time you sit down for a meal.
Yes,
Is this cheeseburger
$100%.
going to impact the goals that I've set, and in which way are they going to impact the goals that I've set? Is it going to help me get there? Is it going to take me a step back from getting there?
Yes. And I feel like in business and in life, a lot of times our brain is working on habit and instinct, and doing those things. Being intentional is what can help frame those things and move the business, the product, the project, the service in the direction, like you're saying, that we're mapped out, if we have at least mapped it out. So that's brilliant. I like that a lot. This is definitely worth a listening to again.
Yeah, and what
I
what I specifically like about it too is that what I really didn't want to do with this episode is complain or paint clients in this weird strange light of like, how dare you, and you should be listening to this, and you should be just submitting to whatever the agency or freelancer tells you to do. What I really wanted to note here is that ultimately, yes, we want them to be successful, but these are relationship building things, right? We want relationships with these clients, with the people behind the businesses that we're working with, and having these metrics to follow gets us to a place at the very end of the project where hopefully everyone's happy. Like, we're happy, we've done a great job, the client's happy because they're successful, and we've built this relationship with them that we can build off, whether that's personal, professional, depending on the project and what kind it is, and whether it's
mm-hmm.
if you're this is a whole different podcast, but if you're in like a niche industry where the people that you're working with are probably also going to be people that you could have, great friendships with at the end of the day, getting everyone to the same place at the end of that project where everybody can be happy and everybody is winning is going to be super beneficial for just forming those relationships. And I think that that's kind of the key there that I wanted to focus in on too, is that end goal is to form these solid relationships with the clients that you're working with.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that that is the purpose behind it. 'Cause yes, absolutely right. We don't we don't just want to complain and get things off our chest, but it is super helpful to, as you're saying, build better relationships with our clients and prospective clients. Love it.
Absolutely. Do you have any others to add at this time? That was all that I had on my list.
Okay, I think I did have one more.
Yeah.
This one in turn also comes down to communication and expectation. So one, communicating this expectation to a client, to help them have an understanding of when to expect a particular task to get done. This is outside of the scope of like just building the project. Like you're saying, relationally, like if they need updates and fixes to a website and changes, you know, removing a removing an employee or adding like an event date, stuff like that. If we're responsible for making those changes as the agency, is I would love for clients to understand that sometimes communications, but ultimately the task as well that you're looking to have done for you, it's not instantaneous. We live in a day and age where a lot of things are instantaneous these days. One being communication, two, media we can listen to or download or whatever we want at the drop of a hat. And sometimes we can forget that we can't always get back to somebody as quickly as they get back to us, whether it's email, text, even a phone call, the same way that, you're scheduling someone for a booking or scheduling someone to have a procedure done or scheduling someone to come by and look at your house, especially if we are an agency who has, tens of clients, dozens of clients, hundreds of clients, that you will be put into oftentimes a scheduling system, or you won't be the first person in line, because we also have 10 to 20 other people who are wanting our time and attention as well. And sometimes people don't understand that they're not always going to be the drop of a hat client or first one to be served immediately, if it's not like an emergency type thing where the website goes down and goes black for hours on end.
Different situation there.
Yes. Yeah. And so sometimes if they could understand that part, and like giving a little grace, or having an expectation, hey, we might get back to you the next day, not 30 minutes later, would be helpful for everyone. Because again, like you said, relationally, that keeps tensions down, and people will have that expectation of, oh, okay, and not being anxious of being again, disregarded or not looked after, or a client feeling like we're not giving them any attention whatsoever. Is just having them understand that there will be particular instances or times where it just won't be instantaneous. So that would be a good one for everyone to remember. And then even on our end too, is that we can't always expect clients to assume that they need to get back to us as quickly as possible, because again, they have other things going on and other things within their schedule, and clients and patients of their own that they're attending to and focusing on.
Yeah, that definitely goes both ways. I've been guilty of doing that, sending out a, hey, I need an answer on a quick change for this page, and then assuming that I'm going to get an answer back within 5 minutes so I can continue on. That's not always going to be the case. Everyone's busy. Sometimes you just have to let that go, move on to a different thing, and come back to it. And I think in terms of setting expectations, I think that's on the agency, right? I think
absolutely.
When I was doing support for SkyVerge for WooCommerce plugins, and we very clearly on the form that gets submitted say, their turnaround time is no more than 24 hours. So it might be less than that, but it also could be 24 hours. So
I love it.
Setting that expectation, one, gives us the ability to take 24 hours if, a lot of support has come in and we need to kind of sift through that and get everyone answered. But also, if we can do it in 5 or 6 hours, then that just creates this even better, more delightful experience. And most of the time it didn't take us 24 hours. Most of the time it was somewhere in the like 10 to 12 range, which is always just a much better experience. But it's because you set the expectation. If the expectation is 6 hours and you take 10, then people are going to be frustrated. If the expectation is 24 hours and you take 10, then everyone's happy that it took less than half as much time as you said it might.
Oh yeah, that's certainly so true, because run into that in a regular world experience. Is you're getting cable or internet set up at your house, and they give you the 2 hour time frame just in case. A lot of times they can get it done in 40 minutes, and you're like, oh, I had a really pleasant experience with Spectrum or whoever. But if they give you an hour time frame and it takes 2 hours, yes, totally different feeling. Absolutely.
Yep. Exactly. Well, with that, I think I'll go ahead and wrap us up here for this one. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a favorable rating in your favorite podcast app or website. It makes a difference and helps others discover the podcast. To be notified when future episodes come out, please go ahead and subscribe as well. For more about us and what we're up to, check out our website, heading2.com. That's headingtwo.com. And follow us on Twitter at heading2. Again, headingtwo. Also, if you have questions you'd like answered on the show, go ahead and send those to hello@heading2.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Bye, everyone.
See y'all next week. Bye.